this feast then has been given new importance, and it would be well to examine one specific area in which this hidden, otherwise, country man excelled, so much so that he has been given to the whole church as the model for all priests engaged specifically in parish work, but now, since the year of prayer for priests, essentially, as the patron of all priests of the world. It is that of what is the essence of pastoral work, the essence of the pastor. It is important because right now, actually, especially in Ireland, we have a problem which has been discussed on the highest level and has been actually made public knowledge. The question of what we want as priests and what the model looked for in our seminary is. As you know, that's the Angelus ringing, so we'll say it at the end, 6 o'clock. By the way, open a parenthesis, that happened the other day when I had travelling people with me, young ones, one in her early 20s, and this Angelus went off on my alarm and on hers at exactly the same time. And I thought, that is interesting that a young travelling mother, 24 or so, should have the Angelus ringing in her pocket. That's a little parenthesis. To get back to what I was saying, the question of what people are discussing now with regard to what's going on in our seminary, that it has been picked up, that they were looking for a certain model of priest, and what was happening as a consequence was that those who weren't fitting into that mould were finding it rough going, and we know the consequences. Now it's being cleaned up, but it may be somewhat late. There's been a huge amount of damage done, losing good vocations. Now, this model that we have for the true pastor, the Curé, is a point of reference. It would seem that the kind of model that was being proposed, secretly but efficaciously, was something like this. The priest of today needs to be as competent as any managing director in making sure that the whole administration of a large parish area, because of the shortage of priests, works perfectly well, with intelligent delegation of roles, the use of the laity. He must be an expert in communication skills, have plenty of initiative. He must have plenty of ideas. Okay. But what did the Curé have in all that? I would say 0 and minus. What he did have was something of a different order, and it would seem that the Holy Spirit was far more interested in that order. The whole of his life was spent doing what? Being a channel of grace directly between heaven and earth in the specific area to which he was consecrated, the sacramental sphere. His whole life was that of handling souls, hours and hours of heart-to-heart encounter with no intermediary, the crunch. So much so that on 2 occasions he became somewhat frustrated and disheartened and wanted to escape, to go to the purely contemplative life. And at least once he did try to escape, and he was tracked down. And he had to face another priest, explain what he was trying to do. He wanted to go to La Trappe. Could have been La Trappe des Dombes at that time, the nearest one to him. And it was given to him to understand that the Lord was giving him souls, les âmes, and in particular sinners, les pécheurs. And he would groan and lament and weep and he saw it. Les armes, les armes. He was a necessary channel, and it would not have been a higher degree of sanctity for him to go to the cloister and close his mouth. His mouth was needed, and his priesthood was needed. So, what happened? He wasted no words. He got to the point immediately, but every encounter was efficacious. He saw things, as you know, far more than the penitent himself. He also saw the future. That meant also discernment with regard to vocation. We have many testimonies, some quite unexpected actually. There was one young person who came and he was keen on becoming a priest and had all that was necessary to get there. In his case, the Curé closed his eyes for a second and rather unusually didn't answer immediately but went for a moment into prayer mode and it would seem looked into the future. And he said, "Mariez-vous," get married. What? Mariez-vous. Would you put that in writing? Mariez-vous. So off he went with this billet and proposed to a girl eventually. Out of that came, I believe, 10 priests and 1, if not 2 bishops. So the Lord knew what was ahead. He also had other surprises. Those who had no intention of marrying, a U-turn on the spot. Or rather, no intention of not marrying. We had one girl who came at the age of 18 or so, keen on getting married, and immediately the Curé said to her, "You will be a nun." Her reaction was, "No, no, 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 no," and his was, "Si, si, 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 si," and she did. So, the Lord's ways are mysterious. He also warned people what was ahead of them. A lady came to him and he warned her after the absolution, when she was going back, that her life was going to be in danger. Eventually, a man will try to get you. Escape, think of me, and run as fast as you can. She went to look for work as a server, a servant girl, une bonne in French, somebody who does practical work in a house, and knocked at this place where there was some kind of advertisement given, and was about to come in and realized what was happening. She immediately ran as fast as she could with him running after her, but she thought of the Curé and was given him extra strength to just get out of his reach. He was a very dangerous man. Another lady came and he warned her as she was going out of the confession, "You will be in great danger on the way back, but you are in a state of grace. You will actually have a fatal accident." And on the way back, a snake came out, bit her, and it was a lethal bite. But he had already said to her that this confession and this communion would act as viaticum and preparation for her, so she died well prepared. Other things would happen on a daily basis. One time, 2 young men came to see him from quite a distance and stayed the night in the auberge there in the village to rest after their long journey. At midnight, while one of them was fast asleep, the other happened to be awake and heard something. He actually got out of bed and opened the window to see what was going on and heard this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful angelic singing, something he never heard the likes of before. You know what on earth was going on. Eventually he got to sleep. But then when he came to Curé the following day, the priest himself asked whether he had heard the singing of the angels. Yes, but what was all that about? At that moment, said the Curé, the greatest sinner on earth was being converted, and the angels were rejoicing. To this day, no one knows who it was, but Curé obviously knew who it was. It probably wasn't in the village itself, but it was somewhere. He had gifts. And so it was that the veil was often lifted on the beyond. One time a person came to him and she almost screamed when she saw something. At a certain point, she saw that his eyes were, as it were, aflame. She intuited that he had a gaze which was not just human, that he could see into her soul. These gifts are rare, but they're not unknown, and most generations seem to have had someone somewhere on earth who had them. We had in our time Padre Pio, but others too here and there are around. God is not short of his gifts, and what comes through is that certain elements usually coincide. We have in all these holy priests one great thing in common: the huge care that was taken with regard to the Blessed Sacrament. One time, Curé was going along the altar rails, and he got to one person and gave her to understand that she was not prepared. And I think he whispered why. She had not said even her morning prayers. Apparently they had gone early and whizzed off in a carriage to get there in time. But in that process all prayer had been jettisoned. So the Curé knew it, and he was fairly keen that no one should rush unprepared to receive the Lord of Lords. I believe also that he would know if someone had neglected the fast, which from that time was midnight, even accidentally and with distraction. He would also know when people were not using the day of the Lord according to the will of the Lord. One time he was giving what he would do on a daily basis, the catechism. He would give teaching, not a sermon now, that bit, it would be teaching, catechism, to the people in the full church. And he was preaching quite often on this question of both abuse of the Lord's name and the Lord's day. And at one point he noticed that people were about to go, and he knew why. They were going to get a carriage back to go on a long journey on the Lord's day. And he indicated quite clearly that the will of the Lord was not such, that he wanted peace and quiet on his day. Now, there is an element where a good chunk of that will be eternally valid. If we're seriously in love with someone, we give that person quality time. The amount of attention that we give to someone indicates what we think of that person. If in practice the day of the Lord is not given to the Lord, then there's something imbalanced in our relationship with the Lord. We're parking him. If in his day Curé was keen on not having noise in the village square on the day of the Lord, and having people calm and quiet to receive the teaching, how much more is that valid for our time? We have plenty of noise 7 days a week. It's enough to leave 6 days for what has to be done, and truly to enjoy the rest the Lord wants for us and the intimacy that he wants to share with us on that one noiseless day. And we can invent wonderful noise, even holy noise. It's not quite the same to switch on a holy machine and to open sacred scripture or a well-chosen book. In one case, we're not obliged to follow the rhythm of someone else. We can calmly pause and let the Lord minister to our heart between the paragraphs. It's a different mode. There's too much going into our head too quickly. So physically, to have what the Curé wanted to train his parish to have on the day of the Lord is eternally valid. It will be until the end of time. The Lord meant us to be a Sunday people, and also a people with clean lips. He was also keen on modesty. So overexposure to e.g. screens with things popping up all the time is not pleasing to the Lord. If we're serious about Jesus, we believe that he's watching us and we feel his pain. We also know that this great saint was a great mystic. One day he let it slip. Attention, my bag! Careful of my ring. He had, it would seem, some kind of mystical espousal, because one day somebody found him in ecstasy and heard him talking to a lady. They intuited it was the Blessed Virgin herself, and he had some kind of, as it were, special relationship with the Mother of God. This intimacy that we don't quite understand. We find it in certain great saints, Hermann Joseph of Remote Attention, Bernard de Clairvaux, and so on. Great devotees of Our Blessed Lady were caught up in ecstasy. But also, with regard to the Blessed Sacrament itself, he let this slip. Il y en a qui le voient. Some see him. And it would seem that distractedly he let out, because when he was elevating the Blessed Sacrament, people saw his face was radiant. And also, the altar boys did notice, if they looked carefully, that he would go actually off the ground. Sometimes at least. There was levitation would seem happening at the consecration at certain moments, and he would actually come out with things like this, because there are certain points in the old rite when the priest has to look at the host for a good while. And he said this one time, he was afraid that having gazed on him so much in this world, he was afraid of not having the gaze in the next. Great humility there. He also at his last communion cried, how it's sad to have one's last Holy Communion. He knew it was the last. But he did also say, comme il est beau de mourir quand on a vécu sur la croix, how beautiful it is to die when one has lived on the cross. This phenomenon of elevation and ecstasy at the altar has been seen in quite a few saints over the centuries. He may still be alive. There's a priest in Italy, Don Carlo, he still has it. I think he's still alive. He goes into levitation physically at the altar. Philip Neri, of course, is a famous case. His server, his altar boy, would leave him at the offertory and come back a couple of hours later. He'd go into ecstasy. And on it would go. They had to command Padre Pio the limits of how long he could celebrate for, because he would go into this mode of otherness and time would stand still. So we see this coming through in all these holy priests of God, the centrality of the encounter at the altar. I make a jump. I hear at Maynooth there's been quite a lot of hassle with regard to, e.g., the very believing, apparently, in the real presence, because the way that it's actually handled at the altar would betray something questionable. For instance, I heard that the gospel is raised up something gloriously like this, and the sacrament is something like this, indicating, and of course there's been the whole eruption, this question of whether it should be standing or sitting, and there was a period when they're not being encouraged to, not sitting but kneeling. The question of physically attitude towards the Blessed Sacrament comes through, because one is actually the language of the heart and mind coming through in expression in the body. We express, as in human love, what we are and feel spontaneously. Right now, if one goes to certain places, one will find that there aren't even kneelers in church or in the place where one is celebrating an oratory. People are sitting throughout the Eucharistic prayer. Now, this actually is nothing short of Protestantism. That's how it's done in not the Anglican Church, but the free churches, where there's no presence at all. I mean, no presence believed in at all. So, what's going on here? Is the Lord going to bless a situation where he's not going to be honoured? What he wants is not managing directors and DJs at ordination. He wants intimates of his heart. People who will, mystagogues, who will lead the people of God into an experience and an encounter. Well, that's not going to happen if they're sitting down at the Eucharistic prayer. It will happen if they meet and see a person who's in love and in his own way in ecstatic mode, bringing them with him not into more of himself, but into something beyond himself. And in that he will love the people of God, as did the Curés, who had lots and lots of time, not to shuffle around bits of paper, but to engage with problems, souls as they are. So this is what the Church wants. And where that will happen, the Lord will add his blessing, and we will see no shortage of true vocations.
Messe sur le monde, Mass over the world, facing east. Lines written at the approach of ordination. A time and half a time, a little time, holds me from thee, my King, and we shall stand alone upon the orb. For small steps climb to greatness, where fond cherubs fear to land. This is the stone where oft this miracle was heard, times past to pass. This is the home away from home, where but a particle shines in the heart, wherein strange myriads come. I have come home, my God, and yesterday stands safely at the door. For evermore I shall adorn thee, touch as touch they did, that knew how this to handle long before. For long is not our song, and we hand on a little secret, that o'er old dawns shone.
Hello again to all my friends.
I say, you said...
To use your imagination.
Imagination?
You are my very special friend.
I say, very special friend, eh? And what have we here behind you?
Duper.
What?
It's fun to use your imagination.
Oh, you keep repeating yourself, old man. Yeah, I'm interested in what these people are saying behind you. What's going on here altogether? Eh?
You're stupendous.
What?
You're super duper.
Oh, I say, yeah, well, I'm just mind these nuns here. They can't manage to light their thing properly, you know. They've been at this for the last 50 years. Yeah, trying to light these things they don't know how to use. Anyway, they shouldn't be smoking anyway. And what do you say to all this?
You are my very special friend.
Oh, go to bed, sir. You're too repetitive. And what's going on beside you? We have here, oh, I say, what are you called? Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, and what's going on here beside you? Oh, I say, in fast cars, eh? Yeah, okay, I will leave you in peace. Goodbye, little one, goodbye.
Super duper.
Oh,